And in this case, the blue means that, okay, we've got a decreased blood calcium. It stimulates the parathyroid hormone to secrete PTH. So you got too much blood calcium. So it gets into the bloodstream. The bloodstream then sends a signal to the bones to release calcium. Or it goes to the kidneys to conserve calcium and activate vitamin D. And then from there, it goes into reabsorption. Okay? If it increases your blood calcium inhibits, then more PHT is released. That's constantly going on in your bodies. Okay? It depends on your diet, it depends on the consumption of much, and it depends on how much sunlight. And so remember, when we talk about hormone regulations, your body is constantly wanting to be at homeostasis. Just right. Everything's just right. Just perfect. But nothing's in this world is just perfect. You've always got too much or not enough. Hormones control that action. And so hormones are stimulated if you got too much or too less. And so there's usually one or the other. In this case, it's just one, and that is to regulate calcium levels for bone intensity and also absorption. So, disorders of a parathyroid gland. So you can have a disorder of parathyroid. If it's hyperparathyroidism, okay, fatigue, muscular weakness, painful joints, increased PTH secretion, you could have a tumor. They remove the tumors and correct the bone deformities. If it's hypo, you could have muscle cramps, decreased PTH secretions, reduces osteoclast activity, and remember, osteoblast builds it up, builds the bone up. Osteoclast breaks it down, part of remodeling. If it reduces osteoclast activity, then this is an issue. This is a problem because the bones are not going through remodeling, and therefore you could have calcium salt injections, massive doses of vitamin D. And so it's not good. It's not good. To tell you the truth, I want you to know for the test, I want you to know that hyperthyroidism gives you a tumor. To tell you the difference between a thyroid tumor and a hyperthyroid tumor, I wouldn't know the difference. I wouldn't know if I saw a tumor I couldn't tell you. Did it come from the thyroid gland or did it come from the hyperthyroid gland? But remember, there's hypo diseases and hyper diseases. And in hyper, there is a tumor, but it's hyperthyroidism. Okay. So the adrenal glands, if you remember, the adrenal glands sit on the kidneys. They're closely associated with the kidneys. They set like a cap on each kidney. Their numerous hormones are secreted. So there are numerous here, and I want you to know that your author really doesn't spell this out because we learned that there's either steroid hormones or non-steroid, right? Your steroid hormones are from the kidney, from the adrenal glands. Okay, so all of these, I believe all of these hormones are considered steroid hormones. Okay. The adrenal hormones play a role in maintaining blood sodium levels and responding to stress that includes certain sex hormones. The adrenal gland contains two portions, the outer cortex and the inner medulla. So on the outer part of the adrenal gland that you can see, that would be the outer cortex. If you peeled that layer off, and I don't have that right in front of me, but if you peeled that layer off, then you would look at the, basically the medulla. And so, I don't know, in this case, this would be the outer. So if we were talking about the kidneys itself, this would be considered the cortex. This would be the inner medulla on the inside, okay? So it'd be the same way with the adrenal glands in this case. So the outer portion of the gland secretes steroid hormones, as I said earlier. So I want you to know that. Well, what are they? Your sex hormones, aldosterone, cortisol. These would be considered steroid hormones. The adrenal medullas have epinephrine and norepinephrine. So when you think about our epinephrine and norepinephrine levels, these are levels that can enhance your body's abilities. And so when we mix with these levels, and so when you think about sinus medication, you ever took sinus medication and you got hyped up? Okay, that's where it's messing with these levels. So we'll read on, but know that the adrenal medulla has 80% epinephrine and 20% norepinephrine. It consists of regularly shaped cells grouped around blood vessels. And here you can see the inner medulla on the left. And if we flipped it over on the outside, then we would call that the adrenal cortex. The medulla being on the inside. Well, here you can, this outer edge would be considered the cortex. See how it's funky looking? But on the inside of it, if we peeled it open, that would be the medulla. All right. So let's talk about epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay. These are two closely related amine hormones secreted by the adrenal medulla. The effects of these hormones are similar to those to the sympathetic stimulation increases your heart rate, your blood pressure, your airflow to the lungs, your blood glucose levels, and decreased digestive activity. And in some cases, the effects of the two hormones are identical. The hormone effects last 10 times longer than those of the neurotransmitters because they are removed from the blood more slowly than neurotransmitters are removed from the synapses. So you're going to catch a high off of this. And so when you take cold medicine, then you're going to find that cold medicine has a similar amine ingredients that you find in behind the pharmacy. Okay, so they've learned how to take that cold medicine, the ingredients in that, and mix it, because what does it do? It causes your heart rate to speed up. It gives you, your endorphins are really increasing, and you get a buzz from it. So they even go a little step further and they take rat dope and battery acid and they make meth with the same ingredients. And you really get a buzz for about 3 days because it stays in your blood system much longer. Consequences to that, the downfall, you start losing your teeth because you lose all of the I'm trying to think of the terminology that holds your teeth, but they start losing their top teeth because there's nothing that just rips the teeth, and the nerves let loose, and they don't feel it actually. And so, because of this, remember that these are in the medulla, and 80% is epinephrine and 20% is norepinephrine. Epinephrine really synthesizes norepinephrine. And it messes with your sympathetic system that regulates your blood, that regulates your heart rate. And you see also we have dopamine. And so that's part of it too. And these are part of your sympathetic pathway. So let's talk about what happens here. So in this case, epinephrine and norepinephrine, if we're talking about the heart, it increases your heart rate. If it's blood vessels, vasodilation, epinephrine, especially important in skeletal muscle offsite of fight or flight. So you get, and so what epinephrine does is, like, you remember me telling you that your dopamines get real excited for when you're scared. And when you're scared, it's called fight or flight. And you get these high levels of epinephrine, and it's a high. And so animals go through this when it's predator prey. They either run as fast as they can, and you know when you've been scared, you feel like you can just do anything. And so the predator has to be able to attack. But if the animal can't outrun the predator, what does the animal do? It turns around and fights for its life. So that's what it means by fight or flight. And so when you're at those high alert conditions where you're scared to death, that's where that happens. And so that meth high is very similar to this. And I've never had a meth high, so don't think that. But I've read about it, and I don't want it. I want my teeth, you all know what summer teeth are? Some are going this way and some are going that way. And I got a couple of those in the back. So, your systemic blood pressure increases due to increases cardiac output. Airways dilation, reticular formation of the brainstem is activated. The liver promotes breakdown of glycogen and glucose, increasing blood sugar levels, and then your metabolic rate increases. So you can look at those things. We'll talk more about dopamines down the road. The adrenal cortex has these 3 zones, class. You do not have to know the zones, but these zones are part of the process of the hormone being synthesized, okay, through these zones. What I do want you to know, aldosterone is a hormone that comes from the adrenal cortex. Again, these would be what? They would be steroid hormones. They help regulate the concentration of extracellular electrolytes by conserving sodium ions and excreting potassium ions. Your cortisol decreases protein synthesis, increases fatty acid release, stimulates glucose, synthesizes from non-carbohydrates, and then your adrenal androgens supplement sex hormones from gonads made be converted into estrogen, okay? So just know then estrogen, testosterone, come from the adrenal cortex, but so do, and they are steroid hormones, okay? And then just remember, in fact, we'll talk a little bit more. So aldosterone promotes the excretion of potassium and sodium levels. Remember, we don't think about our potassium levels and our sodium levels because why? Because our body regulates sodium and potassium by way of pumps. Our nervous system, what it does, class, our nervous system works off of potassium, sodium, okay? And so if our levels are right, and sodium is always being pumped out of the cell, potassium's being pumped into our cells to allow our nervous system to communicate with our bones and muscles, and it allows me to move my arm. But what happens if they get out of whack? Well, if they get out of whack, if you have too much potassium, you start getting twitches. That could be a problem, okay? So your diet, as you get older, you have to worry about things like that. You have to worry about how much sodium are you taking, because if you take too much sodium, you can, it can cause you to get into positive feedback. Same way with potassium levels. People who drink way too much water could get high levels of potassium. And so, and if you have too much sodium, and then it regulates your blood sugar, and so H2O is retained along by sodium by osmosis. So sodium levels help obtain your H2O levels. But again, if you drink too much H2O, then your potassium levels get too high. And we don't really think about that at our age. Okay, you're right. My age too, but there are people that deal with them starting in my, well, how old am I? I'm in my late 50s. And so my body's starting to change, you know, unfortunately. I peaked that hill and now I'm on my way down, unfortunately. And so I've noticed changes in my body just in the last couple of years. So enjoy your age, because don't ever take it for granted though. Systems that help maintain normal blood pressure is the renin in your body, angiotensin 2. I said stensin, excuse me, it's angiotensin without an S. And the product of this system increases blood pressure and promotes secretion of aldosterone. Just main thing is know that aldosterone regulates sodium and potassium. That's all I want you to know. And that it is what type of hormone is it?
Steroid.
Hormone stuff from the cortex. You can read through this. This is again regulating how hormones work. Also remember, and it talks about how it comes from the brain. Whenever you have to have ACTH released into the bloodstream, and this is again a steroid hormone dealing with your potassium, sodium levels. Remember, it always starts with the with the hypothalamus secreting down to the pituitary gland. And in this case, if you know that sodium and potassium regulates your nervous system to control your muscles, then it's probably going to go down the posterior and not the anterior. But remember, the anterior and posterior both are used just the anterior synthesizes hormones and releases them. I think that's enough. I don't want to get too deep into it where, you know, you're having to now think you're being a chemist, which that's not what I'm going to do here. So there are a couple of diseases that go along with the adrenal cortex. Okay? Remember the adrenal cortex, think about the 3 types of hormones, and the adrenal cortex has to do with regulating potassium and sodium and the ACTH does that. Okay. So Addison disease and Cushing syndrome. So if you've probably heard of Addison disease, I don't know if you've heard of it. It decreases your blood sodium levels. So I talked a little bit about potassium levels increasing, causing twitches with the nervous system, uncontrollable. Eye motion, twitching. And maybe you've had that with an eyelid, and it just, and so it's a sign of maybe you got too much potassium. Okay? So Addison disease means someone with not enough sodium. And remember, our bodies regulate sodium, and sodium pumps in out of our nervous cells, neurotransmitters or neurons as we call them, and it goes to the next neuron, to the next neuron, to the next neuron. And so we regulate that. We think that our body has that, but yet your body can get low on sodium. Okay? It's due to insufficient hormone secretion from the adrenal cortex. So someone who has a disease known as Addison disease, their adrenal cortex is not supplying enough of the hormone out of this adrenal cortex. It results in your electrolytes and glucose imbalances. Someone's going to be dehydrated, remember, because that's what it does. Sodium dehydrates, it regulates water volume. You ever sloshed around your belly and you drank too much water and you hear it? Well, that's what is working in your adrenal glands, your cortisol. It's trying to suck it up, in other words. It's trying to keep it from taking away all of your sodium. And so sodium is there trying to soak up the water. So someone that has this irregularity, and has Addison's disease or maybe symptoms, they're going to have blood pressure problems. They're going to be fatigued. They could be sick. They could have redness in their skin where it just, their neck might be really red. So they could have an issue there. Maybe their sodium levels are low and they don't realize it. So as you are in this field, you need to be able to detect and look for signs of changes in people, especially people that you know every day. And as you get to the point where you're starting to be around older people, you will see these signs. You'll be able to detect them to know whether or not they need medical care. It can be fatal, Addison disease. And it's due to a severe electrolyte imbalance. Sodium levels are low, so therefore it's good to give them higher levels later. So Cushing disease due to hypersecretion of cortisol because of the adrenal tumor, or excess secretion of ACTH. So too much ACT of this anterior pituitary. So it results in muscle wasting, loss of bone, elevated bone glucose, sodium levels have a retention. So then H2O retention by osmosis, increase in blood pressure, puffy skin, abnormal deposition of adipose tissue in the face and back. So what it's saying is, wherever you have adipose beings, it can store fat. Okay? Stomach is a great place to store fat. Buttocks stores fat. Around the neck stores fat. These are areas that will swell out with someone with this disease. So next is the pancreas. So I currently know someone that has pancreatic cancer in the hospital right now. It's a guy that I work with, his dad, 75, is unfortunately not making it. It's his third day in hospice. And he started having symptoms that they trace back to pancreas. So the pancreas is very unique. You can't live without it. Technology is there. They didn't find it fast enough for him. He started having symptoms, ignored his symptoms, excessive hiccups is what he was dealing with. And these hiccups were not normal because it's happening all the time. And so, but he started having problems with his liver and his lungs. Really didn't know it, then he was in stage 4 before they even realized what was happening. And so they sent him home. They gave him a little chemo and said, work on. So what about it? It has two major types of secretory tissue. You remember I said it's the only organ that has endocrine functions and exocrine. So it has ducts, pancreatic ducts, and it has hormones. Okay. These three hormones are secreted by the endocrine cells, pancreatic isolates or isolates of the langerins, or langerins. There's no I, so I think it's langerins. So there's two terms, glucagon and insulin. You've all heard of insulin, probably but not glucagon, okay? So the pancreas is unique because as we eat, our blood levels rise to the point sugar levels have to be brought down. And so glucagon is secreted by alpha cells, increase blood glucose. When your levels are too high, blood glucagon is released. Okay? Insulin is secreted by your beta cells, decreases blood glucose when it's too low. The somatostatin is secreted by delta cells, inhibits secretion of insulin and glucagon. So I want you to know for the test, I want you to know that the pancreas has both endocrine function and exocrine function. Has three hormones, okay? Glucagon and insulin deals with blood sugar, okay? When it's too high, glucagon's released. When it's too low, insulin's released, okay? As we eat, our blood sugars rise and our levels have to go down. People who are diabetics deal with, sometimes their blood sugar levels get too low and they go into a diabetic coma. And so they have to regulate and test their blood daily. So keep that in mind. So for the test, no glucagon and insulin, what they're secreted, Glucagon's secreted by your alpha cells, your insulin secreted by your beta cells. But remember, that means they're secreted inside of the pancreas. The pancreas has both alpha, beta, and delta cells. Okay, there's different types of cells. And they all have a function. And they regulate, the pancreas regulates glucose. There it is. Okay, so the gallbladder releases its fluid, and so it's called bile fluid. Heard of bile fluid? Bile fluid is also a duct. And your bile fluids end up inside of your small intestines. That's where they go. Out your fecal matter. So bile fluids, there's a lot of different types of fluids. You got from your lymphatic system, from your things like ammonia levels. These are the things, the nasty things that we don't think about that has to escape our bodies. End up in the gallbladder. It's not like a filter. The gallbladders, they crystallize. They get to the point as you get older. Some people deal with it in your 20s, but they start making people sick. Their food doesn't want to digest. Then they might start having sodium levels and potassium levels messing with them as well. So all this is going on, and they start getting, one side of their body starts hurting. And they don't know what it is. 9 times out of 10, it's a gallbladder. Okay? Anybody know anybody's had a gallbladder taken out? Have you all or somebody? Okay. Did you get that feeling that I'm talking about? Yeah. So that's what happens. But these fluids end up inside of the intestines. Now the liver is important because it helps recycle blood, worn out blood cells, toxins that enter your body. And some of these toxins end up way into the filtration system, into the gallbladder, such as ammonia levels. And then they empty out into the small intestines and eventually out to your fecal matter. And so when your levels get high, they give you medicine to make you poop, to get rid of ammonia. Because if your ammonia levels get so high, you don't even know who you are. You become lethargic, and you can't comprehend anything. And so that's why, again, we take this stuff for granted. Our electrolyte levels, all of these things you take for granted. But then your pancreatic duct also releases into the small intestine. And we call this the duodenum, where this happens. So you have 2 ducts that go right at the same level. But the pancreas, again, is regulating your sugar levels and secreting hormones to do that. And if it starts it doesn't work, then a person will experience regurgitation, stuff going on in their stomach, stuff wanting to come up their esophagus, hiccups. Well, you don't know that it's happening, but those are signs something's not working. So in this case, this is the structure of the pancreas there. Wanted to let you know this. So glucagon stimulates the liver to break down glycogen and convert non-carbohydrates into glucose. It stimulates the breakdown of fat. Blood glucose concentration. Insulin promotes the formation of glycogen from glucose and inhibits the conversion of non-carbohydrates into glucose and enhances the movement of glucose through adipose and muscle cell membrane. Okay? So then the third one, somatostatin, helps regulate your carbohydrates. Know that glucagon and insulin are both blood glucose concentrations. They're regulating. One is released, blood glucose is high, and if blood glucose is too low, the other one's released. Okay, insulin's released if it's too low. If it's too high, glucagon. Remember, but your diet also increases those levels because of how much sugar you intake with your food. When blood sugar levels decrease, insulin decreases. Okay, in this case, take a look here. After a meal, this is the best way to say it. After a meal, blood glucose rises. Okay? Therefore, your pancreatic isolates insulin secretions. Glucagon decreases. Cellular uptake of glucose and formation of glycogen. Between meals, insulin decreases, glucagon secretion increases. Glucagon, is broken down into glucose and non-carbohydrates are converted into glucose. So when blood sugar levels decrease, insulin decreases, glucagon increases. I'll say that again so you can write this down. When blood sugar levels decrease, okay, so you remember, if blood levels decrease, blood sugar levels decrease, that tells you a couple things right here. It's decreased because either you're in between meals or you haven't eaten at all that morning, right? Makes sense? So if blood levels decrease, your insulin levels are decreasing. Glucagon increases because these levels are decreasing. But if you're eating, what happens? Insulin increases, doesn't it? Because blood sugar has increased, your insulin levels has increased. So I'm going to read this to you, and you write it down word for word, and let it make sense. When blood sugar levels decrease, insulin decreases, glucagon increases. So if I said when blood sugar levels increase, insulin increases, glucagon decreases. Doesn't it? Then go back and look at this chart and make it make sense. Always remember, when you eat, insulin levels go up. When you're not eating or you're in between meals, insulin levels are down, glucagon levels are going up. It's regulating that imbalance or that balance that you need. Diabetes. Okay, we've heard of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. Okay, well, what is diabetes? It's a metabolic disease resulting from the lack of insulin or the ability of the cells to recognize insulin. Elevated glucose, blood glucose, can damage your eyes, your heart, your kidneys, your nerves. The result in disturbance in carbohydrate, proteins, fat metabolism. Insulin normally promotes glucose uptake by adipose and muscle cells. result is hyperglycemia or high blood glucose. Cells turn to other sources of energy which promotes tissue wastage. Weight declines, hunger increases, fatigue increases, wounds do not heal well, growth stops in children. Glucose spills into urine and water followed by osmosis, leading to dehydration and thirst. So I want you to be able to determine type 1 diabetes and type 2. Type 1 class requires administration of insulin. So someone that's using insulin has type 1 diabetes. Where can we get insulin? From pigs and cattle, where insulin is obtained. Human insulin can be synthesized using a compact DNA technology. Insulin is produced by genetically altered bacteria. So you can get that bacteria from pigs and cattle, and you can genetically alter it. People with insulin pumps, possibly the aerosol form, they could have skin patches. Okay. If you're type 2, your low carbohydrate, high protein diet, regular exercise, medications that increase glucose production, gastric bypass surgery can all be part of this. Now, type 2 class, most people that have diabetes are either pre-diabetic that turned into type 2, 90 to 95% are type 2. Okay? It's much milder than type 1. Type 1, remember, lack insulin production. 5 to 10% fall in this category. It's more serious. Both are serious. And it usually begins before the age of 20. I want you to know that type 1 for the test is a disorder of the immune system. Type 1 diabetes is a disorder of the immune system. I want you to know type 2 is a result from insensitivity of cells to insulin. Type 1, insulin, there is a lack, there's no production. Type 2, there's an insensitivity of cells to insulin, and it's much milder than type 1. And here you can look at the treating the diabetes. All right, so I'm going to quickly run through the glands in the brain, the pineal gland, the thymus. I'm sorry, no, I'm just going to talk about the pineal gland. Thought I was going to do all the brain. So the pineal gland is found in the brain. Remember, it's opposite of the hypothalamus, just above the brainstem. It's between the cerebral hemispheres. Secretes melatonin. That's important to know. The melatonin in your body is the pigmentation of your skin. And circadian rhythms, it regulates. Has to do with day and night. You're up, your rhythms. I'll talk more about that later. The thymus gland is found in the mediastinum, between your lungs. On that poster, you can see the thymus gland. What I want you to know, it promotes the development of T cells. That's important. And your thymus gland is all about immunity. Got anything don't, yeah, no, I'll put the poster up. You remember the thymus gland? Well, that, it shrinks. Like right now, I'm not even for sure if it's seeable, but as you get my age, it's probably not even there. And so that's why older people are more susceptible to viruses, especially respiratory illnesses. That's why they tell them, you know, keep them out of the public, because it can take their life. And the thymus gland just shrinks. It's the largest at the infant, toddler stage. Makes sense. They always catch something, don't they? But they bounce back. It's because of the thymus gland and the T cells. T cells are your attack cells. They're white blood cells that attack any type of invasion in your body, whether it's foreign invasion from a virus, bacteria, from a cut, to a virus inhaling something. So there's a new virus out. I don't know if you guys heard about this virus. And it's from India. It has to do with the fruit bat, and they're really worried about it. So it's far worse than what we just dealt with in COVID. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's slipping my mind.
I think I know what you're talking about. It was like a 40 to 70% death rate.
Yes, they don't. They think they have it contained. So did China.
Yeah.
But the problem is, these third world countries, they live around animals. Like, we have farm animals that we have out in the pasture. These third world countries, they might have these animals in their house. They live with them. These bats, they might eat the bats. You know, and so it can be transferred and you realize it. So the thymus gland, I want you to know T cells, important for immunity. It's largest at the infant stage. The pineal gland deals with circadian rhythms, daytime. Other glands, your reproductive organs, ovaries, produce estrogen and progesterone. Testes produce testosterone. The placenta produces estrogen and progesterone and gonadotropin. Your digestive glands produce hormones to regulate digestion. Your heart produces, your heart just stimulates sodium secretion in your urine. Your kidneys produce erythropoietin, which stimulates red blood cell production. So know that your erythropoietin is your red blood cells. That's what carries your oxygen. Okay? We'll be into chapter 14, we'll talk about that. But your white blood cells are there for defense. Your red blood cells are there to carry oxygen. So that's our two types of they both are synthesized from red bone marrow. Okay? Your bones develops your blood cells, but they die. Okay? And these cells will end up in your liver and then out your intestines and even through your urinary system. Okay. Survival depends on maintaining homeostasis, factors that change the internal and external environment. Factors, they are potentially life-threatening. Certain potentially dangerous factors can trigger a loss in homeostasis. When sensory receptors detect changes, they send nerve impulses to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus activates the sympathetic nervous system and increases secretion of the hormone. Factor capable of initiating a response to stressors. Stress is a condition that produces in response to stressors. I want you to know what a stressor is and what stress is. So there's two types of stress, class: psychological stress and physical stress. You ever been so worried about something, stressed out? Test. Maybe you did something and you said, "Oh man, went too far." No, I ain't gonna tell myself, but I did something I'm not proud of. That's psychological, right? When I was a little kid, I get in trouble in school, especially if I got whacked, we call it. I wasn't gonna tell my parents, because I knew what was gonna happen. But if that's psychological stress, because I can sweat, or if I did something I knew I was gonna get caught. So, a person feels loss, anger, fear, guilt. Someone dies, they might feel that they led to the death. Physical stress is temperature extremes, infection, injury, oxygen deficiency. Know the difference between these two, okay? Blood pressure will rise to the increase of stress, okay? You ever been where you're scared, your heart's thumping? You realize you ever had that? People that go hunting sometimes and kill these deer, they get all this adrenaline, they start, they get all excited, rush. It would be something if the deer could pack a gun and shoot back. Would that be something? It'd be a real sport then, wouldn't it?
Hunter be hunted.
Up in a tree where the deer don't even look up, and that's up. All right, so let's talk about hypothalamus controls the response to stress. Remember, that's the command center. GAS, the alarm stage, the resistance stage. The alarm stage is fight or flight, what I was talking to you about. That is where your body's endorphins kick in. It messes with your sympathetic impulses of your nervous system, causes your heart rate to go up, increase in blood glucose, fatty acids, heart and breathing rate. Someone goes through that. Their epinephrine, there's that word, increases secretion, intensifies and prolongs these responses. Person, they see that deer coming, their hearts are thumping. People have heart attacks for that when they die. So the resistance stage is the slower, longer lasting CRA and ACTH, which are these steroid hormones. I want you to know that ADH and rennin causes water retention. The exhaustion stage begins after months of being in resistance stage. Waste due to depletion of nutrients in the body, electrolyte imbalance, suppression of the immune system. Effects are due to long-term oversecretion of cortisol can result in death. Major events in general stress syndrome. All right, lifespan changes. I want you to know here, the endocrine glands decrease in size as you get older. So it's not just the thymus, it's all endocrine glands. Muscular and skeletal strength decreases as growth hormone levels decline. ADH levels increase due to slower elimination by the liver and kidneys. Calcitonin, if you remember that, calcitonin is a thyroid hormone. Increasing the risk of osteoporosis. So when does that usually hit? I think the age of 30, when you hit the age of 30, your calcitonin levels start to decline. By the time you're in your 50s, osteoporosis can start occurring. PTH levels change, contribute to the risk of osteoporosis. especially in females. Changes in melatonin secretions affects the body's clock. Remember melatonin, which gland is that in? From your notes? Pineal gland. Remember, your melanocytes, we all have a certain number of melanocytes. That determines our skin. As we're all Caucasians, you can look at each other, we all have different types of skin color, okay?